Thanks. Now, Director of Capital Program Planning, Ryan Josty, and Chief of Policy and Strategic Planning, Lindsay Heffernan, are here with an update from the Capital Investment Plan. Just as a reminder to the board, at the April meeting, this was one of the final items, and so we didn't really have time to have a good discussion. This usually is one of the topics, as we've heard already today, that engenders a lot of comment from elected officials and the public. So we wanted to make sure we put back a chunk of time to have a dialogue. But we asked Lindsay to kind of refresh us with some of the points that she made at the April meeting. So we just kind of set the context. And then we can have a discussion about concerns that you're hearing from various folks.
Thank you very much, Chair Glenn. Thank you, Secretary, and all the directors for the time to talk about this important issue. My attempt is to balance your very long agenda, when I get pressured, my push to speak way too fast, and the need for you all to have time to discuss. So my hope today is to ensure that you can have a robust discussion, and we are providing the information that you need on the proposed 25 to 29 CIP. We want to begin by putting our current proposal of the capital investment plan in context with our vision for the authority's role in supporting the transportation system of the future and ultimately our thriving region. As the General Manager already discussed, we continue to make progress on the track improvement program and our efforts toward a state of good repair, increasing our transit frequency and reliability, but we know this is not enough. To gain the public trust in our transit system, to increase ridership, and to contribute fully to a growing and vibrant Commonwealth. We have many challenges to address and overcome, including meeting the needs of our region and our riders, addressing our workforce challenges, ensuring our system's ability to meet the impacts of climate change, as we've just heard discussed again. And yet we have ambitious goals and plans for the future, many of which can be found both in our strategic plan, our Beyond Mobility plan with MassDOT, and within our capital investment plan. I do want to take a moment to thank the leadership of General Manager Ang. During part of his reorganization last fall, the MBTA brought capital planning under my umbrella, which was trying to align our capital investments with our strategic plan in order to bring that alignment and ensure that all of our investments align with our broader goals and our vision. We certainly know, as you all know, the authority is not unique when it comes to these funding challenges. As you can see from these headlines, transit systems across the country, I would note especially those in the biggest metro areas with the most fixed infrastructure to maintain, are struggling with fiscal challenges. Most recently, these challenges are a result of lower fare revenue consequent to the loss of ridership from the global pandemic. But in the long view, they are the result of an instability in transit funding at both the local and the national level. The COVID-driven crisis is a new iteration of this periodic crisis in transit across America. A challenge for the MBTA, however, is a challenge for the vitality of all of the Commonwealth, and by extension, all of New England. In fiscal year 2023, the MBTA provided 233 million trips across our transit system. We serve 175 cities and towns in Massachusetts. The American Public Transit Association, APTA, has found that transit spending in general has a threefold economic impact in the region that it serves. And our partners at A Better City found in their 2018 report, this graphic on the top left of your screen is from their report called the Transit Dividend, that the MBTA specifically provides regional economic benefits to the tune of $11.4 billion annually. Our services support the economy and the livability of the Boston region and help to achieve the goals of the Healey-Driscoll administration. When at our best, transit enables many societal benefits. To name but a few on the right-hand side of your screen, and as we've heard discussed from many of the commenters, I would note, the MBTA reduces infrastructure costs and environmental impacts in local communities by decreasing the need to build highway infrastructure and parking lots. The MBTA is also a key climate solution by providing low-carbon transportation options and shifting more transit trips in the region to transit, more trips across the region to transit. The MBTA also improves equity throughout the region by enabling low-cost mobility and connecting people to jobs and housing. The MBTA also helps us face the cost of living crisis. Transit is key to scaling abundant housing, again, as was mentioned in the general manager's remarks, with the recent housing in Attleboro, and can help reduce the transportation and parking costs related to development. And lastly, but not alone, transit is critical to public health and wellness. I want to again appreciate our colleagues and supporters who we have here, that we recognize that we've reduced the burdens of pollution and congestion, and also enable access, frankly, to healthcare. In addition, we know that we will see in subsequent slides, much of the fiscal year 25 to 29 proposed CIP funding is focused on addressing critical asset needs and keeping the T on a path to better safety, service, accessibility, sustainability, and equity. Our investment choices in the fiscal year 25 to 29 CIP are hard, but they are fundamental to supporting the authority in restoring service and rebuilding trust in our system. We know that these investments are not sufficient, and that part of not just restoring, but improving public trust is offering a vision for what comes next. What is the future for the system, and how can we deliver on our strategic goals? Beyond a state of good repair and modernization, we have to develop a vision for and invest in goals such as mode shift, which can only result from increasing frequency and reliability, integration, and the quality of our services. Sustainability and resilience, including protecting our system and staff and riders from the catastrophic impacts of climate change, while also reducing our footprint in terms of decarbonization, our fleet and facilities, and ensuring that our power infrastructure meets the needs of an electrified system. Our service and economic vitality, including making the transit system fully accessible, connecting people and places, and improving customer service through wayfinding, digital communication, and integration between modes. And lastly, our workforce investments to enable safer, high-quality service for our customers and making the T the employer of choice in the region. The current CIP that you'll all be discussing today lays a foundation for our work to transform the MBTA. Our plans and projects that are in the pipeline are both exciting and are critical to achieving the Commonwealth and the MBTA's own goals, but we cannot achieve them with the current levels of funding that we have. And beyond those plans, there will of course still be work to do to continue to transform the MBTA into a truly world-class system. We look forward to continued conversation about how to fill the gap between what we can fund today and what needs to happen as we move towards establishing the MBTA as the world-class system that meets the needs of the Commonwealth. You are aware this slide was in our prior deck, aligned with the goals of the administration and the Secretary of Transportation. The proposed CIP includes investments that target critical assets, keep the T on a path to better safety, service, and sustainability. A couple of quick highlights, some of which were mentioned here this morning, that are our major investments included in the CIP to support these objectives. These are, of course, just a subset of nearly 600 projects, but noteworthy ones. Funding for North Station Drawbridge 1 replacement, critical to our commuter rail service in the north of Boston. Major station accessibility upgrades and urgent repairs across the system. The infrastructure for the pilots for the 20-minute decarbonized service along the Fairmount line, and investments towards regional rail service along the environmental justice corridor. 40% of our riders are on our bus system, and accessibility and bus station improvements are also found within the CIP, including work at Nubian Square to improve both accessibility and the circulation of our buses. Phase 1 of bus network redesign, implementation, and widespread transit priority improvement projects are also included. And then, of course, a catchment of other vital work to include improved right-of-way access, service reliability, and the investments in sustainability and resilience of our system. While the MBTA only has $843 million in new funding available to allocate this year, given our projected levels of state, federal, and MBTA funding over the next 5 years, many projects requested were not funded or were only partially funded. Cost estimates from these unfunded requests totaled over $11 billion. Unfunded requests remain in all CIP program areas. Examples of an unfunded request include new grade separations, security upgrades, signal and power upgrades, facility improvements, accessibility projects, large-scale facilities and station upgrades, communication system overhauls, vehicle procurements, and specific system expansion projects. Many of the outstanding and unfunded needs are large-scale projects that would take up a massive amount of the funding and limit our ability to address funding needs across our entire portfolio. An example of this critical project, for instance, is Arborway Bus Maintenance Facility, needing funding, and it's the top on this representative sample, needing $511 million for that project. Should we fund that project fully this year, it would have taken up 60% of all of our new funding than just that one project. You all did receive a further file documenting some of the major projects lacking funding today to bring them to fruition. I also would want to take a note that the MBTA continues an aggressive and very ambitious program of discretionary grant applications, trying to seek more funding to solve some of this problem. Just last week, for instance, the team submitted one of our largest grant ever for $720 million to hopefully support North Station Drawbridge. So we will continue in that vein as best as we can as staff. We are nearing the end. When we'll come back to you in June, we've hosted public meetings. We had strong turnout and received comments from over 300 individuals. Following today's discussion, we will bring the CIP to the June A&F and, of course, your special board meeting, hoping to seek a vote for its approval. While we're currently reviewing each and every comment, that period just closed last week, initial themes are already apparent from the commenters. Support for bus and commuter rail electrification, including specific appreciation, as you heard this morning, for the Fairmount line infrastructure work. Support for projects addressing assets in a state of good repair, including North Station Drawbridge. Requests for additional funding for large efforts, such as regional rail, phase 1, the Red-Blue Connector, and projects addressing climate vulnerabilities, and concerns about meeting electrification targets due to the repurposization of some Arborway funding. Many members of the public and elected officials commented on behalf of community organizations, businesses, and governmental organizations. I do want all of those folks to know that we read every comment. We do appreciate them, and when we come back in June, we'll be able to share a little more detail. And so with that, Mr. Chair, happy to take any questions as would be helpful.
The question that came up earlier in the meeting about station rehabilitations, can you address what is in the SIP that will address that?
Sure. There are, in our last presentation, we had broken down by programmatic area, and Ryan may be able to help me out here. While we're investing significant amounts in our station, that need continues to be incredibly large. I would note that large projects such as Lynn Station, Chinatown Accessibility, Forest Hills Improvement are not funded or have very small amounts of funding only to get them through design. And so stations are the gateway to our system. We recognize how important they are. I think in the CIP, what you will find is we are trying to balance the money that we need for stations with the money that we need for track signal and power with the money that we need for maintenance facilities.
Right, but the question is what's in the SIP, not what's not in the SIP.
I don't have my deck from the last time we were here, but I'm happy to get back to you in either an email or at your June meeting of exactly which stations are covered. I don't have that list in front of me.
Just first, let me commend you for doing an incredible job putting together this massive list of projects. And for me, what's really heartening is it's one of the first times I've heard sort of the MBTA talk about a vision and the importance of an overall vision. We're talking billions of dollars that we are going to need to fund the system. And we're talking about needing to convince the legislature and in Commonwealth that the investments are worth it. So I just want to urge you that as you're talking about a vision, give us some visuals so we can understand what this will look like if it's all done with the right level of investment. Like, it's so important that we continue to talk about that it's good for climate, it's good for the economy, it's good for the entire region, and give people a sense of what the future looks like. Because I think it's going to be important to get it through the legislature and other parts of the region. I want to come back to some very specific projects and want to ask some questions. So for the Arborway plan, you talked about earlier how important it is for electrification. If we don't get that plan as part of the SIP and it doesn't get in the budget, we might not meet our electrification goals. We're not going to be able to get articulated buses to the degree that we need to in that area. So can you say a little bit about why is that not fully funded, and what do we need to do to make sure that is fully funded?
Sure. A couple of comments. Electrification is a key goal for the MBTA and electrifying our bus network. We have an ambitious plan This is one of those spaces where our ambitious plan and our resources available are in a bit of conflict with, or they're contrasted with each other. Arborway is our next up bus facility. It will house up to 200 battery electric buses, and it is currently in design. Arborway currently has enough money to facilitate and complete the design process for Arborway, which is what the money that it needs in the next fiscal year. And so Arborway is not slowed down. Arborway is not deprioritized, nothing of the sort. One of the things that the MBTA has historically done, and I think a path we're trying to take it's sort of a different path with our limited capital dollars, is to make sure that when we decide to move forward with a project, that project is fully funded, and that we don't have a line item with small amounts of money sitting, relatively small, considering it's a $511 million project, but having $25 million or $30 million sit there, which is nowhere near what you're going to need to actually build the project. And so what we did when we were looking at the track improvement program, this was to fund the red and orange line cars. We looked at that and said, is that the most efficient use of money? At the time, I believe, I can confirm my numbers, there's a lot in my head, we had about $33 million sitting in the Arborway design contract. Our staff tell us that to complete design of that project is in the handful of millions, $2, $3, $4 million over the next year is what they're going to need to spend. That means that we have, call it 28 million, sitting there waiting. It's not going to get you the 500 million, and the question that we had to ask ourselves is that the best use today, when we also need red and orange line cars to provide the service that folks need and some other things. So I think we are hoping that while taking a little bit of that money, we took 8 million, still again, well more than is going to be needed in the next fiscal year, in order to come up with a larger plan about how are we going to fund these things such that we stay on target with the goals in the clean energy plan and make sure that we can ultimately meet those. I would be lying if I didn't say there are risks here, that the amount of money that we need and the ambitious goals that the state has set for us keep me up at night, because I would like to see us be able to get there, and it is just a very big and expensive project. Does that help answer the question about the Arborway funding?
Not really, but I hear you. I mean, we're working with the limited resources that we have, but if we are going to meet our climate goals, we are going to look at electrification goals, we are going to build out a robust bus system, we can't do it without looking at Arborway and some of these other projects.
Agreed.
Yeah, for the North Station drawbridge project, right, as part of the Central Artery project, there was a pedestrian walkway, and that got removed out of the SIP. Can you talk a little bit about, is that true, and is that going to be put back into the SIP, or why was that decided not to be part of that initiative, especially since it was legally mandated?
Yeah, our designers are working, as always. Anytime you cross over a waterway, there's a significant amount of oversight from a bunch of regulators, in particular the Coast Guard. And so it is not that we don't agree that a pedestrian pathway would be a very beneficial feature and help with connectivity over that waterway. At this point in time, in order to make sure that we could advance this project, given the current permitting that we have, that project is not, that subset is not a piece of our current funding plan. We are in conversations with the City of Boston about the importance of that project, and we're just actually providing them some updates about what we were hearing from the Coast Guard, so that we can make sure that we design something that meets their approvals, but putting another path over the water puts another layer of administrative approvals that we don't want in any way slow down North Station drawbridge.
Yeah, it's a vital connection, though, to the Charles River Basin, so what's the alternative for that if you're not going to do a walkway?
I don't think we're saying we're not doing a walkway. This year, we're not funding that piece of work because we wanted to put all of our dollars into the criticality of that drawbridge, which supports a third of all of our commuter rail system and Amtrak. And I think we need to continue some conversations with the Coast Guard and some other regulators to make sure we understand the environmental impacts and what else it would do. So we're not making a statement about a lack of interest in the pedestrian bridge, but given the limited dollars today, we're putting those dollars towards the bridge reconstruction itself.
Great. And then I have one last question for you, which is 40% of all of our transit riders or bus riders, and the general manager alluded to this already, that, as you're making changes, as you're making improvements, you're going to try to fix things. Can you say a little bit about in the SIP, for the bus network, what are sort of the capital improvement projects you're going to be doing along the way? So better stations, we already saw that during the last meeting, they talked about better signage, but what else is in the SIP that's going to help our bus riders?
Sure. So two major projects in terms of high dollar value. There are many smaller ones. Certainly is the fully funding for Quincy and North Cambridge. And so I don't want to, buses are unique in our system because the amount of fixed infrastructure is so much less than a rail system. But addressing those two maintenance facilities are the top priority in order to then get to the next one, which is Arbor Way, which we've just discussed, which is in design. In terms of funding for transit priority, we have, I think, $15 million for transit priority projects across the system. We're looking at projects such as the Nubian Way Circulator. We have projects around accessibility of bus stops. I will note we have, as I believe Ms. Brailsford talked about when she was last here, the 8,000 bus stops across our system, and the accessibility of each and every one of those stops deserves attention and is a constant challenge, from smaller roadway projects that impact curb cuts to snow and ice removal. And so there is some funding in there to continue to advance that work. I would also note, in terms of the vehicle side of the house, we do have significant dollars to continue to procure battery electric buses. I don't know the number off of my head. Happy to get that to you. But those both facilities and vehicles are the vast majority of the funding, along with some of the transit improvements that we, of course, do in partnerships with municipalities or roadway owners, whether DCR or MassDOT.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to do high-quality shelters and to really think about, on-time signaling so people know when the bus is coming. So I want to encourage those improvements to be part of the SIP as well. And I know you have some funding in there.
Yeah.
I see you like that idea.
Not the battery buses, but the rest of it.
Thank you. Question on the $11 billion. How much of that is state of good repair and how much of that is expansion? The unmet requests.
Yeah. If I had to give you a rough estimate, and I'd be happy to confirm these figures, the big expansion projects currently that are unfunded, that are in our plan, I want to just note the E-branch expansion that was talked about earlier this morning is not, and as the representative noted, she's looking for some feasibility funding to start to study that. But the red-blue connector currently has $30 million. It needs just over $1 billion. The Silver Line extension project, which is to extend the Silver Line through Everett, an important and underserved community, needs $102 million approximately. The E-branch extension, I will note, our staff requested money to study that at $2.4 million, but we did not have those dollars to allocate. So of the $11 billion, let's remove $1.1 billion approximately, Director, because we have the money, of course, to finish out the work in Southwest Rail Center.
$1.1 billion for expansion is what you're saying? Of
Yeah.
the $11 billion of the requests?
Yes.
So I guess, and I'll make a comment, because I know the request is for the legislature, but I think more importantly, all of us need to understand that this is a substantial lack of investment that in terms of the dollars we have to do what we need to do to make this work. It's almost mind-boggling in some respects. We can sit here all day and talk about all of the exciting things we can do, and we need to build support beyond the legislature to start to talk about what we need to do to create a 21st century system, because we continue to hear about the benefits. The Economic Justice Corridor is the same place as the Fairmont line. I live in Lynn, Everett, Revere. Those trains are, feet away from the houses that are along that corridor with diesel engines. So we can hear it and hear it and hear it, but the reality is we need to step up and take action as a Commonwealth. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, except if we really want to create a system that works and resolve or create the opportunity and the return on the investment that comes from what we're talking about here. The economic, the Better City has talked about that in a smaller place, is that we really have to understand that the SIPs are not meeting the need that we all want to see met. And we hear that through the discussions and the questions. So that can't be minimized, because if we don't, we have choices to either do something or to continue on a road that creates gridlock, lack of housing, and inability to grow our economy. So my comment is we all have to come together to find a way to get the dollars to make these projects and proposals and the future opportunity a reality. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for your presentation. And just to piggyback on Director McGee, and forgive my ignorance here, is not the goal to look at also what's funded so we could see what could be repurposed or reallocated or eliminated? I mean, and are we voting on the SIP next month? Is it? So I don't feel like I have a clear view to, what we're funding versus, and what that cost is and the benefits, and we're a month away. So just full disclosure, a little fearful about that.
Sure. Happy to provide more information in whatever way we can. I think we've tried to provide both in the CIP book a high-level summary of what is in the plan by mode, by program type, so by structures versus vehicles, right? And so, and then also, of course, providing the list of every project. I recognize providing you a list of 633 projects. It doesn't make it very easy. I also want to acknowledge some of our staff, my staff who are in the room, who have a very unfavorable job of trying to figure out which of these make the most sense and how to balance that. So I want to thank them for this work. But if there are different things that you think you need or you want, we're more than happy to try to provide those. Providing a list of, as we have, what the program spend is and what the total authorized budget will allow when you look at that list of all of the projects, gives a sense of, are we fully funding the item or are we not fully funding it? Are we giving it some pieces to get it a little farther along? Now, sometimes that is very intentional, because projects, in terms of their delivery, have a lifeline that's maybe much longer than this 5-year capital plan, right? We have 10-year vehicle procurements at times, right? And so we're funding it. It's a whole budget is significantly larger, and in this year we're not funding it as much. But Director Smart, if there are different things that you think you need that you've not received, we've certainly tried to provide everything that we think would be helpful. We're more than happy to take any feedback and get you more information. Yeah.
I have one other question. So earlier, when you started your presentation, you mentioned that APTA has done some good analysis. It says that public transit provides 3 times the economic benefit. Have you mapped out, or is there some analysis that show which initiatives or which of these projects are likely to help sort of, spur the economy in the way that we're hoping it will?
Sure. I recognize this slide has a lot of little pictures, and I apologize, but it is hard to talk about 5 different modes quickly. And so some of what I think we know, for instance, we need to do modernization in our system, right? And so what we're trying to communicate here as best we can is that we see this capital investment plan, acknowledging Director McGee's comments of there isn't enough money, as smart and strategic investments for the long term, whether it's around investments in the EJ corridor along the rail network or the Fairmount line that are ultimately part of, in this middle box here, are the bigger plans that we have. So regional rail is a huge program that is exciting, that makes the people at the T want to do it, but that ultimately leads to that vision for the future of frequent, reliable, and connected service. And so, I would say, in terms of the development dollars, when we think about this region, and every transit system is different, have we done a deep modal analysis? No. If you want my professional opinion about some of the things that we know are really going to matter, we know we have a housing crisis in Massachusetts, and we know that the density in some of our communities is not where some people think we're going to need to get around that housing crisis. Investments in regional rail, while very expensive, are also going to pay some of those dividends of connecting people to affordable housing and to jobs. At the same time, we know that fleet modernization of bus and a electrified bus system combined with transit priority and a better, more competitive bus system is also a fiscally responsible way to provide a lot more transit service because building rail lines are expensive, and making sure that we're still helping connect people to the destinations that they need to go to. So there we both have bus network redesign, and which encompasses both the routes and the transit priority and the bus lanes and the other things to make buses competitive, and fleet electrification combined together. Then you get the benefits of both a decarbonized system, and we get to that, hopefully, that we're providing the customer the experience that they're looking for on our bus system. I don't have a regional economic analysis that gets down to like which modal impacts, but those are some of my thoughts about how we try to balance this.
Okay, thanks.
Request, is it possible to make a request to receive a presentation on a list of our actual projects?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want that in a one-on-one setting, or coming back to the board about the things that are currently funded or proposed to be funded, Director Smart?
I would love a one-on-one, but I'm sure my
Sure.
colleagues would love to hear that information also.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. See you in June.
So next, we're going to hear from Brian Kane. And Brian, in addition to what you were planning to say, which I thought your report was quite helpful, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do if somebody raises their hand. Well, no, I'm sorry, no,
Frankly, I'm taking this state to make people wait probably 4 hours after the lunch break, to speak for 2 minutes, they put you on timer.
well, I'm trying to balance off everybody's needs here. So we had one session for public comment. We accommodated a number of people in the 15 minutes. And
This is your job, the rest of us have other jobs.
it's not my job.